Good afternoon and welcome to the pre-council meeting, Monday, January 13th. Item 1, Kay, could you please call roll?
Mr. Carmichael.
Here.
Mrs. Saniuk.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Knutson. Mr. Preister. Mrs. Blood.
Present.
Item 2, this meeting will be conducted according to the Open Meetings Act, posted in the entry to the council chambers. Item 3, additional items. 3A, Steve Sauer, OPPD, special presentation on cost saving from the energy efficiency projects at the Bellevue Library.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, my name is Steve Sauer. I'm account executive from Omaha Public Power District. I'm basically your single point contact for the city. We were asked to respond or to get involved with the Bellevue Public Library quite a few years back. With the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, some funds became available. So some of the work that we were looking at doing at the library, that funding became the source to proceed here back in 2010. So we've actually implemented a couple years ago, and we've gone about a year and a half of total implementation. So we thought we'd come and give you some feedback and results of the work, and also deliver a check. The actual check is an incentive check as a result of the. It's an incentive check as a result of the reduction of energy result of the project. So. Move along. OPPD's work is called ECO 24/7. It stands for Energy Commissioning and Optimization.
I can hear a little bit in the background, but I can't hear real good yet.
I'll do better. How's this? Does this sound better, Don?
That's better.
Hi, Don. My name is Steve Sauer. We met with the Bellevue Library work.
Yeah, great.
All right. The first slide is just to talk about what ECO 24/7 is and how we began back in 2009 looking at the Bellevue Library. It involved basically a survey that the city filled out, some mechanical drawings that our engineers reviewed. We looked at utility data that went back 3 years, and then we did an initial walkthrough, which Lupe was very much involved with. And we met with the people that were that do a lot of the HVAC work and the energy work at the library. And we interviewed them, and then we proceeded to do a study in 2010. And then when the funding became available through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, then we went to implementation. And so we finished that back in 2012. And then we have what we call follow-up services to kind of to tweak it a little bit, make sure there's not any issues. And eventually we'll tell you about the results of that. But before we do that, we'll talk a little bit about the work scope. I'm not going to go through every one of these bullets. I'll back up to them and talk about any specific item. In fact, I should introduce Justin Lawrence, who was the engineer that helped in the project, was the project manager, and Jim Chris, who is the manager of key accounts. So they were very much involved in the project also. Some of the scope of work was the zone temperature control upgrades, the rooftop unit upgrades. Basically, we had to install a new energy management system that was compatible to implement the technology. We did some lighting upgrades, and then we typically don't do building envelope, doors, windows replacements, but there was enough money in the act to proceed with that, so we did that also. We replaced the front doors, the inner doors, the side doors that has the automatic opener, and then we also replaced some windows. Here's the results. The benefits of this project, it improved the comfort and the operation and maintenance of the facility, improved system reliability, there was a humidity issue in the building, it improved indoor air quality, lighting levels, quality, and reduced heating and ventilation, air conditioning type comfort issues. And at the same time, we reduced energy consumption. The annual energy consumption is, that it averaged was 17.5%, and it also reduced the demand by 7.9%. So the net savings for the year is about a little over $5,000 of annual savings. The top item is the actual total amount of the project was almost $226,000. Of that was received from the federal government was $194,000. So there was a little bit that the city came up with on their own. As far as incentives, when we go into a building and we look at implementing a project, the study was a little over $10,000. And when a customer moves forward with the study, we give a 50% incentive to move forward. So the first incentive was already distributed a couple years ago, and that was for $5,500. And then the second incentive is the check that I'm holding. That actually I delivered back in December because I didn't want to hang on to it, so this is a fake. So that one is $3,800. We wait with that one to make sure that what we forecast actually is produced, and it did a little bit better than we expected. So we're excited about that. And so that's why we're here today, is to share that good news. And to share the good news ongoing. As you know, rates will probably go up over years, and so this will be an ongoing savings. Because the program is called Continuous Eco 24/7, but it's kind of a continuous type program. It's meant as the building occupancy or the demand changes, it'll change automatically. That's how the control system works. With that, I'm here to answer any of your questions. Go ahead, sir.
What is the life expectancy of the alterations you made to the building?
I'll defer that to Justin. I don't believe,
That's typically just like the other standard control. Yeah, because this is just a typical type of control, like the building automation system, right? That's I don't think the only thing is like the technology. Let's say technology advance, right? Let's say 10 or 20 years. Then we just say, okay, we want to upgrade to a next level technology. This technology, the product itself is last forever. Yeah. Pretty much, it's just for example, the library, before we come in, right, they install like a very old thermostat control system. So then we look at, okay, at this stage, we have this new technology. Then we should go ahead and upgrade, to the current level of technology. So, but just the product itself, really, just you will see like I don't know whether you see something like pneumatic control, right?
Mhm.
That's like very old stuff, but really it work, right? But doesn't matter. Today, we have to upgrade because the standard, industry standard, So just the control itself, I don't see, any like a lifetime. I mean, that's really just stay there as a work,
and I didn't see Chonglin sitting out there. Chonglin is with Best Tech. This technology is actually a partner of ours that we use to implement this throughout our whole service territory. So I would say, to answer your question in a not so technical way, is it's probably the state-of-the-art technology today. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Justin Watson, mechanical engineer with OPPD. I was kind of hoping they would say specifically 20 years or something like that. The controls we put on there are state-of-the-art digital controls for HVAC system. We're putting them on units that are around 12 or 13 years old. The controls themselves last as long as any DDC controller is. I don't know that there's a specific number. We've seen other systems that are 20, 30 years old. There comes a point, though, with electronics and computer equipment that it just becomes so obsolete, it's more cost-effective to replace it. This is no different than another brand control system in that. The advantage to what we do, though, is the equipment isn't wasted, and 5, 10 years, whenever the rooftop units have reached the end of their life and need to be replaced, these controls can be retrofitted on a new unit, so you're not buying the controls again.
So in essence, the savings that you guys are showing will be an extended period for the city's
Correct.
citizens of Bellevue.
Yes.
Councilman Blood?
So ultimately, do you see this as a template of potential that we could utilize at other facilities that are owned by the city of Bellevue? Should there be additional funding available in the future?
Yes, in fact, Don Priester, when we first met with him and the city team, Jerry Hare was still on board, hadn't left service yet. There was some talk of looking at the fire stations. We actually I did receive, or I have a copy of a lot of the data, a lot of the building surveys, but I think he kind of wanted to wait to see this kind of develop and then go from there.
Well, and Councilman Preister is very forward thinking in that fashion, so we're lucky to have him on the council.
Okay.
Any other questions from the council? See none? I think, Phil, did you want to do a photo op at this point?
One last thing, I guess I'd like to thank Loopy also. He was very instrumental in getting our people in and out of the library and accommodating all the strains that went with it.
Steve?
Well, thank you.
It could be anything, look at that. Snuggle in, everybody. Thank you very much. All right. Up there for the mayor. Yes. Oh.
That's the thing, I should mark on that.
Frame it, hang it, finance department.
Thank you very much, OPPD. 3B, City Administrator's Report. Any questions? Mr. Carmichael?
He beat me to it.
Did you get my email this morning, Dan?
Yes, I did, but maybe you didn't get my response. On the lighting standards, I had been approached, actually during a couple of our budget sessions, Steve, by Councilmember Preister, raising concern over, unfortunately, the people from OPPD have left, regarding our $1 million a year bill that we pay for street lighting. And if there was a possibility of going back and reducing number of street lights. In existing areas, that's not feasible because of the way circuits are set up. You just can't go in and take out lighting without having to do a huge amount of reworking of the circuits, and of course then the cost of going in and replacing existing street lights, unless they're towards the end of their life, becomes very cost prohibitive. What was brought up by Councilmember Preister and me is if we would potentially look at developing or looking at our standards for new development, new subdivisions in terms of our lighting standards. Clearly, if you're going to reduce the amount of lighting from what we currently have done over time, it makes sense to do it at the start when you're doing a new development rather than existing. And so I had told Councilmember Preister at that time that I would discuss it with the Planning Commission Chairman, Ralph Gladbeck, and also Chris. I always meet with the chairman and the planning department staff the week before their planning commission meetings to go over the agenda items. And so I discussed that in terms of if they would be willing to take a look at at least the standards for what we would have in new subdivisions, and if it would make sense to, you might say, scale back the degree of lighting that we've done over time in our established areas. And it was felt that it would be worth looking at by the Planning Commission, and so that's why it's before the commission. It was just strictly, I just suggested that now is the time to look at it in terms of new development, if we're going to do anything. And obviously you have to take into account safety issues, you know, adequate lighting. You know, it's sometimes the public feels we overlight streets, and sometimes people feel that they're not well lit enough, especially if they have some crime in their area and that type of thing. So that was kind of how that came about. In terms of your question on the consensus of that, my point has usually been that if we're going to go to a lot of work of drafting a new code or that ideally I would like to at least have a sense that there's at least several council members on board that share that interest, so that way we're not, you know, doing an option for every council member, so to speak. You know, in other words, we're definitely not opposed or resistant to developing some draft language on that for consideration. I just usually like to make sure that if we start off, then we don't have another one or two council members come back and say, well, maybe we think it should be this way. So it's more just protocol, just working together, but there is no real hard and fast policy. I do know at one time, it used to be council policy that a majority of the council actually had to agree upon a drafting of an ordinance before it was brought forward to the council. And again, that was so you didn't have the city attorney spending a lot of time drafting an ordinance where maybe the majority of the council, other council felt it wasn't necessary or didn't agree. And I think, Kathy, you probably remember that, or some of the other council. Now, that has been changed. That's no longer in the council policy, but so we don't go that extreme. So did I answer your question, hopefully? Okay. If there's any other questions, entertain them.
The only thing, Dan, I'd like to say is you're getting hit with a lot of stuff, and not only from the council, but with your staff and everything. It's just, I think what would be very helpful is that when a decision is made, either by you or a council member, to maybe move forward on something, is to maybe just let everybody know as a courtesy, because
Yep.
I can't even imagine the emails and the phone calls and the communications that you get pulling you in many directions. It just would help if we'd have a little heads up before something actually is on our agenda.
And I appreciate that, Paul. We do get hit with a lot. Granted, it's important, though. I realize that there's valid concerns on the part of council and questions. So, you know, we definitely want you to ask those. But sometimes, yeah, they come in droves. But yeah, we will work. We will continue to work and try to always do a better job of getting, you might say, the word out a little bit quicker. Sometimes we kind of get caught off guard too, but we'll work on that. I can assure you that.
Are there any other questions for 3B?
Oh, one other thing. The only other thing, and I'm sure you're all extremely aware of this, that tomorrow we have our strategic planning session. It starts at 8:30 at the training center. You should have got the agenda. You should have got the plan for the current year or the year that just ended, as well as a progress report that goes through and tries to outline everything we've accomplished and some things we still need to work on. So that will be tomorrow.
Mr. Carmichael.
Yeah, Dan, under the city clerk's report, there was a provision in there for the rewrite of Chapter 17. I believe that's mobile homes.
Well, actually, that's mobile homes and some other chapters that overlaps into. We're working on and have been working on reviewing our code to determine what needs to be updated, because we have some antiquated areas that just are way out of touch with current day. Council member Sanyuk had actually asked that staff begin looking at code. Well, it's probably been well over a year ago. And we have been doing it not quite as quickly as we would have liked, just because of a lot of things that kind of derail the process. We have updated a number of sections of code. Chapter 17's a little more problematic because it overlaps into other departments. And in fact, I just had, I might say, encouraged and authorized P&I department to work together, coordinating it through the Assistant City Administrator, Larry Burks, to get those meetings with the other departments moving forward so we can get everything updated in a complementary manner, so we're not, bringing parts forward and realizing there's other areas that need to be brought up to date too.
On to item 4, review and discussion without action of the items on the agenda of the regular council meeting this evening at 6 p.m. Begin with item 3, approval of minutes and advisory committee reports. 3A, approval of agenda. I'm going too fast, Steve, slow me down. B, approval of consent agenda. On the consent agenda, 12B, I will have 12B pulled for further discussion. Pulled for the consent agenda. Item C, approval of minutes of the December 9th regular and pre-council meeting. D, acknowledge receipt of the minutes of the December 19th planning meeting. 4, approval of claims. 5, special presentation. 5A, Roger Cox, Community Policing Coordinator, requests permission to solicit donation for community policing events and programs. Item 6, liquor licenses. 6A, Mr. Wangsen Beck, doing business as Beijing Tokyo. B, Daniel Gross Catholic High School. C, St. Matthew Catholic Community Church. D, Willow Springs Bottling Company, doing business as Cornhusker Beverage. Item 7, ordinance for adoption, third reading, ordinance number 3750. 8, ordinance for public hearing, second reading. 8A, ordinance number 3752. B, 3753. 9, ordinance for introduction, first reading. 9A, ordinance number 3754. 10, public hearing on matters other than ordinances. 10A, redevelopment plan. Mr. Cook.
I just pretty much want, Pat, we were presented with a package with figures on it, and I guess my concern is that those items and the figures, is that pretty much what would be within the law as far as to consider for TIF financing?
Yeah, I did take a look at it. Community development law is fairly, in fact, even has a statute that says it should be liberally construed. It does allow for land acquisition or allows for site improvements and so forth. Typically what has happened, and we're somewhat consistent with Omaha in this regard, is we put together all potential TIF financing, which in this particular instance comes up to about $6.5 million, and then allow for about 60% of that. So the actual TIF financing is going to be that $4 million number that's in there. Additionally, the developer has proposed a revised redevelopment plan in which he wants to be able to stagger the 15 years as the project develops, and that's just a call for you guys to make if that's what you want to do. The developer's telling us that they need to have that just because it's difficult to tell when how fast this development's going to go and whether it may take some years to get some of the lots sold. My initial intention is to try to get the clock rolling and, in a sense, create an incentive for the developer to move forward. However, in the same token, there's several incentives for that developer to move it forward as fast as possible. So I don't know that they're going to be sitting on their heels just because you ended up staggering that 15-year period.
Part of my concern is that, a lot of this, I know this is over 15 years, but he's throwing all these the development of the land, preparing of the land, I guess, and some of these items pertaining to, maybe an additional lane and traffic signals. So to me, all that will not occur at once. I mean, as far as maybe even bringing in dirt, bring up the land, but yet from day one, I mean, how do we break this down? Because like day one, he's not gonna have it all done, but yet he's gonna put in there, retaining walls of 312,000 or some of this stuff that may be done years down the road as a project progresses and expands.
Well, I think one of the important things to understand is as that proceeds, if those improvements and other things are not made and the valuation doesn't increase, you're never gonna collect on the full amount of your TIF financing note. So in other words, by way of example, if the taxes on that property now are 10,000 and it jumps the taxes to 100,000, 90,000 of those dollars would be paid back to the developer. He actually pays into it, then 90,000 comes back to him. And it keeps doing that as that note is going on. But if the build out doesn't occur to the same level that they are anticipating building out to, that note will go partially unpaid because there'll never be enough taxes to pay off the note.
Okay. So the 15 years may, I mean, I realize what he's saying, like you said, staggering. So if he starts a project, well, that 15 years time frame will start. 2 years later, if he starts another project, that 15 years will start.
That's correct.
Okay. So as the property tax is coming in, we pay 90% of that back to him? Or is it
No, I'm just saying it'd be 90,000. You pay back, the difference is at your base level, which let's say it's 10 grand now, if he increases the value of the property to 100,000 in taxes, the difference, 90 grand, gets paid back to the developer on that TIF note until the TIF note's either paid off or expires.
Okay.
So if he doesn't build out to what he's projecting, it's likely that he's never gonna collect on that TIF, all the amount of the TIF note anyway. So in a sense, I guess it resolves itself by virtue of the development goes, and it goes quickly, and he builds out to the number that he's talking about. It usually pans out to be paid in about the 12th, 13th year it would be done. If he doesn't build out to that level, then you're gonna find that the note is gonna go past its 15th year, and there'll be a balance on it that just never gets paid.
So we'll never go over the 4.243.
That's correct.
But it may be short of.
That's correct.
Okay. And the staggering part is pretty typical in projects?
You know, they've actually just recently allowed us to do that, and it was a part of how they were changing the law for the very reason that some projects may take several years of development, and some of that TIF financing is lost if you had to do it all on the first building.
So if this doesn't get, let's say it takes 15 years before the last project goes, and for that last project, then the 15 year starts ticking.
The way that he has it staggered, I believe that to be correct, the way that they're proposing.
And we put a cap on it with the idea that we would say, I mean, I'm not saying that I support this, I'm just throwing it out, but that, we'll give you a cap that within 10 years, it's gotta be built out?
Under a redevelopment plan, you can structure it any way that you want.
Well, I'm just,
There's only maxes out there, there's not minimums, so in other words, you can put restrictions on it if you want.
okay. Well, that's not my goal to put them in a corner. I mean, there's a lot of challenges to develop that land, and I'm glad that, they stepped up and at least are trying, are moving in that direction, but I hate to have something hanging over the city for 30 years, I mean.
No, I think the issue, and in particular in this area, is it's anticipated that we'll have quite a bit of sales tax and occupational tax, and so it makes up for some of the property tax that we've lost. Now, the other players in the game that only get property tax doesn't necessarily help them.
Right.
Mr. Berlowitz?
And Paul, I think part of the developer's concern is the upper parcel obviously is the most attractive for development. The lower parcel is less attractive or more challenging, and I think their concern was really more in terms of the build out and development of that lower parcel. Because it's obviously we had to bring a lot of dirt in. You had some concerns with getting the sewer under the railroad, and it's just not as attractive as that upper part, and I think that was part of their concern too.
And I appreciate that. It's just, we're making a decision that affects
Sure.
schools and a lot of other people that are gonna sit there for many years waiting to see a property tax dollar from that property.
It has a broad impact on a lot of governmental entities.
10A1, Resolution 2014-01. 10A2, approval of preliminary plat. No further questions. Item 11, resolutions, none. 12, current business. 12A, approval of application for waiver of the hunting regulations. B, nomination for appointment of one member of the audit committee. C, approval of consultation service agreement with Mary Lee Simmons to facilitate the city's strategic planning session for tomorrow, Councilwoman Blood.
Dan, did that price go up?
No, actually.
I know she gave us a discount last year because I complained.
Actually, it was 2 years ago. Her original fee, because she facilitated the 2011. Originally, her standard fee was $3,000,
Right.
but she reduced it to $2,500, and she's agreed to keep it that now for a third year, so there's no increase.
And you tried to get somebody who was free again this year, right?
Yeah, we can't get the degree of quality of work that we're looking for pro bono.
Well, that's not true. We weren't able to, but we can because we had Dr. Reed for the first 2 years.
Yeah, it's just that BJ, now that he's vice chancellor
Right.
of the university, doesn't have time. And as I indicated in my report, she was originally proposed and selected because BJ highly recommended her, and she's done a very good job. So that's why I felt comfortable with his recommendation at that time.
I think it's really important to point out the true financial benefits of strategic planning, that although this is a nice chunk of change, the amount of money it saves us by moving forward as a unified front and having a plan and being able to address our budget in a way that can be documented far exceeds the amount of money.
Yeah, the value is extremely significant. This year, obviously, even more so with having a biennial budget going forward, but it gives us not only a near-term roadmap for moving ahead with important initiatives, but allows us to look 2-3 years down the road. So we're always looking ahead to be able to be proactive and on top of issues and important challenges that are going to face the city.
12D, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the project agreement for the Trees for Nebraska Towns TNT grant. Mr. Carmichael.
Dan, do we have a master plan of want to see the repopulation of the trees in Hayworth Park? I know there was, I don't know if the city paid for the last major planting that occurred down there last year or the year before that, or I don't know, there's an awful lot of trees down there, and I wondered if we're going to just continue to plant trees and trees and trees.
Well, clearly, and I'm going to have maybe Jeff jump in on this, but as you know, with the flood, we lost a large number of trees, and so we've been getting grants to try to replace them, which is going to take quite a while. We've also been doing some other tree projects, but Mike Francis isn't here. I know we do have a plan per se on that, but Jeff, you want to jump in?
Well, the way the trees are planted, and he works for the Nebraska,
Arborist?
yeah.
The State Arborist Society?
And anyways, he's the one that kind of spearheaded all this on where the trees are going and how to best populate the park again, to meet the needs that are needed down there, what areas get it the first, and then we would progress from that, depending on how much more grant money we got. But basically, everything down at Hayworth with the trees was paid with either GNT or TNT plantings, the grants we've been getting.
And are our staff going to be doing the planting of those trees?
Our staff is They prep the ground, they drill the holes, get them ready. And then each year we've had volunteers from like Mutual of Omaha, I think Green Bellevue,
Bellevue Garden Club.
and some other organizations, but they come down and actually do the planting, putting them in, putting the mulch around them, and then the initial watering of them.
And who's responsible for the maintenance or watering and fertilizing of the trees till they become established?
Our Parks Department is.
Yeah, Steve, that's part of the requirement of the grant, that we become responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of them as part of the grant conditions.
Are there any other questions? 12E, request permission to seek bids from qualified contractor to design and construct a salt shed for street department. F, approval of bid for Midwest Impressions in the amount of $12,911.60 for the 2014 Youth Summer Baseball Softball uniforms. G, approval of hold harmless and waiver of liability agreement for the Bellevue Fire Department to conduct ice rescue training at the Bellevue Rod and Gun Club. H, approval of low bid from Security Equipment, Inc. in the amount of $67,140 for the access control system for 1510 Wall Street. I, approval of low bid from Pine Communication, the amount of $32,398.95 for the security camera systems for 1510 Wall Street. J, approve of contract for a technology platform used in cyber crimes investigations at the cost of $220 per month. K, approval to ratify a change in the lease proposal to the Veterans Administration. Takes us back to our pre-council meeting agenda. Item 5, executive session. Councilwoman Sanyuk.
For the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of an individual, I move we go into executive session to discuss potential leasing of space at 1500 Wall Street, purchase offers for city property north of Harville Drive and west of Franklin Street, sale of a portion of the city-owned property at 36th and Capehart, joint 911 negotiations, proposed convention event center project, and personnel matters.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. It is now 2:10 p.m. We'll go into executive session, where our discussion will be restricted to what's stated by Councilwoman Sanyuk. Good evening, and welcome to the Bellevue City Council meeting, Monday, January the 13th. First item on the agenda, if I could have Isaiah DeHai, please come forward from Troop 464, Twin Ridge Elementary, to help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could have you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for the invocation following the Pledge of Allegiance by Reverend Kevin Johnson, Christ Cathedral Church, 25th Street. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Mrs. Mayor, City Council members, and all appointed and elected officials of Bellevue, citizens of Bellevue. I'm very delighted to be here tonight to offer this prayer, and I've selected a prayer from St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make us an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love, for it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born again to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. Item 2, Kate, could you please call roll?
Mr. Carmichael.
Here.
Mrs. Saniuk.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Knutson. Mr. Preister. Mrs. Blood.
Present.
Item 2A, this meeting will be conducted according to the Open Meetings Act, which is posted in the entry to the council chambers. Item 3, approval of minutes and advisory committee reports. 3A, approval of agenda. Ms. Sanyuk.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second by Councilman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. 3B, approval of consent agenda. Ms. Sanyuk.
I would like to remove item 12B from the consent agenda. And motion to approve the agenda, the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Second by Mr. Cook. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 3C then will be under consent. D, consent. Item 4, approval of claims under consent. Item 5, special presentations. 5A, Roger Cox, Community Policing Coordinator, requests permission to solicit donations for community policing events and programs. Mr. Cox.
Roger Cox, 2926 Linwood Drive, Bellevue. Well, thank you for having me tonight, Mayor Sanders, council, and all elected representatives. Thank you for your support for the past year as well. As you know, in the city, we run 5 major events throughout the year through the police department that are community outreach or crime prevention, that are community related or crime prevention events. This is done strictly through donations from the city. Bellevue being the giving city that it is, it's an honor to be able to go out and ask them and partner with them for support. So I'm here tonight to ask you permission to solicit money for these events on behalf of the city.
Councilwoman Blood.
Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we approve this request to solicit donations.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carmichael. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you and good luck.
Thanks.
Item 6, liquor licenses. 6A, Mr. Wong-Sen Beck, doing business as Beijing Tokyo. Is he here? Yes. If you would like to come forward.
First, I'm very proud to be here tonight, and I'm applying for the liquor license for my restaurant, which name is Beijing Tokyo, located at 3505. Actually, it's 3503.
Okay, we'll make sure that's corrected.
Yeah, 3503 Simpson Way, suite number 113 in Bellevue.
Thank you. If you could sign in, I'll go ahead and open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time.
Print for name.
I see none. I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Cook?
I'd like to make a motion to, I'd like to make a motion to approve to the Nebraska Liquor Commission the application for a Class I liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits on sale only at 3503 Sampson Way, Suite 113 in Bellevue.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you very much.
6B, Daniel J. Gross Catholic High School. Is there anyone? Application for a special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits at a fundraiser at the high school located at 7700 South 43rd Street from 5 p.m. until 11:55 p.m. on February the 15th, 2014.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Tim Yonk. I'm the head football coach at Gross Catholic High School, and we have a fundraiser at Gross Catholic for 3 activities groups that we would like to be able to have beer and distilled spirits for our attendees. And it's a fundraiser for football, cheerleading, and academic decathlon. And it is adults only, no minors, obviously, but we'd like you to have that on February 15th at Gross Catholic.
Thank you. If you could go ahead and sign in. I'll open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so. Thank you. If you could just step aside for a moment, that would be great.
My name is Steve Draper. I live at 9807 South 24th Street in Bellevue. While I recognize this is an event for adults only, and I know we've had this discussion previously, but I'm still going to voice my opinion here on this. And that is, and I realize there's no legal reason to deny this. But we send a wrong message when at a high school we hold a fundraising event using liquor as the fundraising. That is the target is liquor. And we tell our high school students that they can't do this on this property. But then we as adults do this to fundraise. It just sends the totally wrong message. I just want to say I personally am opposed to it, even though I recognize that you'll probably approve it. Anyway, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Draper. Are there others that would like to speak on this item?
Hi, my name is Jim Modry, 1207 Rebecca Court in Bellevue. And I just want to echo what Mr. Draper said. I have the same feelings. I'm personally opposed, but understand your position as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others? See none, I'll close the public hearing. Councilwoman Blood.
Mayor, before I make a motion, I just want to say something real quickly. We hear a lot about we need less government and less rules. And here, although I've always valued public comment, I don't always have to agree with it. And that's what's great about this job, is that we can agree to disagree. But when it comes to private schools, there's not any magic entity. There's no taxpayer dollars that go into those schools. The parents appreciate the fact that they can go to a fundraiser, buy some silent auction items, help keep the cost of tuition down so they can afford to send their children to the school that they choose to send their children to, especially when you're talking about a middle-class family. And the middle class is pretty quickly disappearing here across the United States, and they need a break too. And I had to be very frank. I sent one of my children to Gross High School. And it was knowledge amongst the parents that you supported the fundraisers, because you knew that in the long run that would benefit your kids. And the alcohol at the events are at adult-only events, and it's not promoted amongst the students, it's promoted amongst the parents. And the bottom line is that they're adults that are old enough to drink and have a license that say so, and they're not giving the alcohol to minors. And it's not on public property, and it's not in a city park. It's in the school that they send their kids to, and the parents support the event. And if they didn't, they wouldn't be having these events. And unfortunately, Catholics like to drink, and I know because I am one. Because it makes a party a little bit more fun if you're drinking responsibly, and you're having fun, and you're bidding on some auction items. So the bottom line is that they're doing it to raise funds. They're doing it in a responsible fashion. They've done it for decades in this fashion, and there's never been any problem. And so with that, I would like to support the application for Daniel J. Gross High School to sell beer and distilled spirits at a fundraiser being held at Daniel J. Gross Catholic High School, 7700 South 43rd Street in Bellevue on February 15th from 5 p.m. to 11:55 p.m. on, I don't have the date in front of me on the form I'm looking at.
You already said it.
Pardon?
February 15th.
February 15th. Oh, I did say that, February 15th.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Sanyuk. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 6C, St. Matthew Catholic Community, application for special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits at a fundraiser at St. Matthew's Catholic Community, 12210 South 36th Street, Suite A, from 6 until 10 p.m. on February 28th.
I'm Scott Eversole, and I'm a teacher at St. Matthew's, representing the St. Matthew's community. And our request tonight is to hold a wine pairing with some local restaurants, along with the fundraisers that you mentioned. And we also understand everything that the people have said here tonight. We take the step of having our school out that day, so that there is even as big a separation as we can get while still holding our fundraiser. And we make that request to the board.
Thank you. You can go ahead and have a seat. I'll now open for public hearing on this matter. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time. See none, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Cook.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for a special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits at a fundraiser at St. Matthew Catholic Community, 12210 South 36th Street, Suite A, from 6 until 10 p.m. on February 28th, 2014.
Second.
A or B?
Sorry.
Suite A.
I have B on the one I'm looking at.
I've got A on mine.
Go down to the agenda item cover sheet. It says B.
Are you in Suite A or B?
B?
Okay.
That's B.
Second.
Did you get the BK? And second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 6D, Willow Springs Bottling Company doing business as Cornhusker Beverage Mart, application for special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits at the Bellevue Police Department Awards Banquet at Bellevue University Administration Building, 1000 Galvin Road South, from 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. on February 8th, 2014. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Jim Subject. I'm the manager of Cornhusker Beverage Mart, and we did the same party for them last year, and it turns out real nice. This way, the policemen that are there pay for their own drinks, and they're all responsible. And to make it legal, they have to have somebody like us do the catering.
Okay. Go ahead and sign in. I'll open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time. See none, I'll close the public hearing. For the wishes of the council. Ms. Sanyuk.
Motion to recommend approval to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission for Willow Springs Bottling Company, DBA Cornhusker Beverage Mart, for an application for a special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits at a BPD Awards Banquet at Bellevue University Administrative Building, 1000 Galvin Road South, from 3 until 11 on February 8th, 2014.
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carmichael. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 7, ordinance for adoption, third reading. Ordinance 7A, number 3750. Kay, could you please read the ordinance?
Ordinance number 3750, an ordinance to add sections 6-56 through 6-61 of new Division 4 of the Bellevue Municipal Code pertaining to feral cat colony caretaker permits in the city of Bellevue, and to provide for the effective date of this ordinance.
Thank you. Ms. Saniak.
Just wanted to say we've made a couple minor changes to this ordinance. We've exempted feral cat colony caretakers from any kind of ownership or interpretation of an ownership. We've also changed the requirement for the caretakers to relocate cats. Instead, we're going to require that 80% of the colony be spayed, neutered, and ear-tipped after a 2-year period. So you have to show that you are actively working towards that end, spay, neuter, and ear tipping. Because the main thrust of this ordinance is to make sure that we reduce the number of cats. It is not to protect the cats, not to prolong their life, but to spay, neuter them humanely and have the colony die out naturally through not enabling them to reproduce. So that's one of the changes. And then we've also added the line, feeding feral cats shall be discontinued if such feeding causes a nuisance to neighbors or creates a condition that is contrary to the health, safety, and welfare of the community involved. So those are the minor changes. Wanted to point those out before we go ahead and vote.
Do I have a motion from the council? Ms. Saniak.
Motion to approve ordinance number 3750.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Mr. Buckley.
Just as a point of procedure, if you'd like to adopt the proposed amended ordinance now that we have a motion and a second, now would be the time to make a motion to amend it with the proposed amendment changes.
Motion to amend 3750 with the proposed amended changes as stated in the council packet.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. And
Motion, do I need to make that motion again?
No.
Actually, that motion's on the table.
motion's on the table, so please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 8, ordinance for public hearing, second reading. 8A, ordinance number 3752. Kate, could you please read the ordinance?
Ordinance number 3752, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Bellevue, Nebraska, as provided for by Article 3 of ordinance number 3619 by changing the zone classification of land located at or about 26th Street and Chandler Road, more particularly described in Section 1 of the ordinance, and to provide an effective date.
Thank you. I'll now open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on ordinance number 3752, I'd like to do so at this time.
I'm Steve Draper at 9807 South 24th Street. I drive right past this property every morning when I leave my house to go to work over at UNO. And any of you in the council should be familiar with the intersection at 25th and Chandler. You know, where that property is located is primarily is a residential area with homes. And that intersection there is right near an elementary school. There's little to no access to that property from 25th Street and also from Chandler. It's very difficult. The one that they're asking to change, the house directly next to it is where the daycare center is happening now with 12 or less children. And there's a large brick wall that separates the property from the sidewalk and from the street area because we did some widening in the street there. That's why that happened. But to me, it's not good for the community to have a larger daycare center there encompassing basically the entire city block from 25th Street going to 26th Street. And I don't think it's good, even though I don't live specifically in that neighborhood, I don't think it's good for that neighborhood, nor do I think it is safe for those children being in a daycare center setting at that busy intersection. That's a very busy intersection, and I'm urging that you'll disapprove this. Thank you.
Don McCormick is my name. I live at 2509 Margot Street, which is in the same block that what they're trying to rezone. They've already got the house rezoned. There's no need for any more. And if you go right up in the same block, there's a large church, and they all have the whole same thing right up there. I don't see no reason to have any more in this block. It's residential, and I'd like to see it stay residential. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Are there others that would like to speak on this item? Please do so. See none? I'm asking if there's anybody else that would like to speak. Thank you, Mr. McCormick. I'll close the public hearing on this item. The third and final reading will be Monday, January 27th. 8B, ordinance number 3753. Kate, could you please read the ordinance?
Ordinance number 3753, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Bellevue, Nebraska, as provided for by Article 3 of ordinance number 3619 by changing the zone classification of land located at 8105 South 36th Street, more particularly described in Section 1 of the ordinance, and to provide an effective date.
Thank you. I'll now open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on ordinance number 3753, please do so at this time.
I'm Mike Heim, and my brother is Charles Heim, whose property it was at 8105 South 36th. We're requesting a change from a RS 72 to an RS 120 because the houses to the north and to the south of us all have horses, and we want to be able to do the same. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heim. Are there others that would like to speak on this item? See none, I'll close the public hearing. The third and final reading will be Monday, January 27th. Thank you. Item 9, ordinance for introduction, first reading. 9A, ordinance number 3754. Hey, could you please read the ordinance?
Ordinance number 3754, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Bellevue, Nebraska, as provided for by Article 3 of ordinance number 3619 by changing the zone classification of land located at or about 36th Street and Sheridan Road, more particularly described in Section 1 of the ordinance, and to provide an effective date.
Thank you. The second reading and public hearing on this item will be Monday, January 27th. Item 10, public hearing on matters other than ordinances. 10A, redevelopment plan for Lot 1 through 12, outlots A through G, Cornhusker Point.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant Royce Cornhusker LLC. They're actually an entity of Lockwood Development. If you're familiar with Lockwood Development, some of the projects that they've done. With me tonight is Mark Duran of Lutz & Company. He helped out with the kind of the financial analysis on the tax increment financing. So if there's any questions with respect to the pro forma, he's here to help with that, although I think I can answer quite a few of those questions as well. Then also Mark Westergaard of E&A Consulting, the consulting engineers on this particular project. So if there's anything in particular from an engineering perspective or questions that you might have regarding any engineering issues, he's here to answer those. If I can't, with respect to the preliminary plat, and that's what's here before you tonight, is a request for the approval of a preliminary plat as well as the redevelopment plan that will allow for the redevelopment agreement to come forward before this council that will actually call out the specifics with respect to the tax increment financing. And that will probably be in the next month or so by the time we get it worked out and negotiated. With respect to the preliminary plat, it's called Cornhusker Point. There are 12 lots, and there's also outlots A through G. Cornhusker Point, of course, this property is currently zoned BG, so there's no zoning change request with this particular application. It's obviously currently underdeveloped and underutilized in its current state, and it's of course the former Wilson concrete site. And what's before you today deals with both the upper and the lower Wilson site, or what's referred to as the upper and lower Wilson site. As far as the surrounding properties, there is single-family residential to the north, there's residential and commercial to the east, and there's commercial and industrial properties to the south, and of course west is more single-family residential housing. As far as access points, there's an existing full movement intersection at Cornhusker Road and the main entrance to the shopping center. That will stay. There will be a left turn lane that will be lengthened. Also, there'll be some modifications to the traffic signal that will be called for on Cornhusker. Also, with respect to Power Drive, this is along Fort Crook. It's kind of the middle access point between Cornhusker and what's Thurston, called Thurston Drive. There'll be a new full signal intersection at that particular location, and then there'll be some new turning lanes that'll be constructed there as well. And then, of course, Thurston, the intersection of Fort Crook and Thurston, if and when a traffic signal is warranted down the future, there's one called for there, but again, it's based upon warrants, and currently that's not warranted until there's full development of the project, and then will have to be relooked at that point in time. As far as the outlets are concerned, the outlets along kind of the northern boundary of the development actually takes care of some encroachments. Some of the single-family houses on the north side of the development actually encroached into the city's property with sheds and some relatively permanent structures. And rather than kind of go through the process with them, we've decided to create outlots, and those outlots will actually be conveyed to the residential housing owners, which actually is a pretty decent solution for everybody, I guess, concerned. The other outlots are for stormwater detention, and they're set forth on the preliminary plat. As far as the redevelopment plan itself, it calls for a mixed-use development. There'll be retail, there'll be restaurants. There's anticipated to be 154,100 square feet, plus a 200-room hotel, which is on the Cornhusker Point part of this, right where Fort Crook and Cornhusker Road intersect. Again, this is all conceptual, and that's why the TIF is necessary, because of the relatively high costs associated with the development up front and the relatively high risk associated with developing the project in full build-out down the road. I think the developer believes the Upper Wilson is more valuable than the Lower Wilson, and the development of the Upper Wilson will probably occur more quickly than the Lower Wilson. And so when you look at the absorption and how long it will take to build this out with the costs that it takes to get this property ready for development, that's where the TIF comes in, and the need for the TIF. As far as the valuation on estimated full build-out, we believe that it'll be somewhere around $26 million. There are $6.5 million in TIF-eligible expenses relating to site acquisition, site preparation, there's public improvements, there's utility relocations, and then, of course, public improvements with respect to the traffic signals and the lengthening of some of those turning movements. As far as the base year valuation, under the community development law, this property is currently exempt because it's owned by the city. So the state law actually calls for the county assessor to put a fair market value on the property. And so we've been working with the county assessor on what that per square foot value may be. And we haven't got the final word on that, but we think that right now, I think we have $1.85 per square foot purchase price with the city. There is a $1.10 square foot appraisal that the developer has with respect to the property, so they're actually paying the city more than the appraisal came back at, which also makes the need for the TIF important. But the assessor's office indicated initially they would be at maybe $2 per foot. I think we can get the assessor's office talked down a little bit based upon the appraisal that we have, and based upon the fact that we're only paying $1.85 per square foot as opposed to the $2 that they were looking at. As far as the anticipating the increment, that'll be about $23,400,000 over the base year valuation. You know, if it gets closer down to the $1.10 per square foot, and that's what we're basing the TIF on at this point. If it's less, it's less, because remember, the way the TIF works is the city only pays the developer to the extent the developer creates the increment. If the increment's not created, the city's not out anything. So it's really at the developer's risk. We believe that will yield at 6% interest, TIF amount of $4,243,168, in tax increment financing. And of course, the justification and everything is in the redevelopment plan, but just to touch on that a little bit, there are poor soils conditions. There's over excavation and replacement of suitable soils. There could be a requirement for certain soil stabilization methods to support the proposed building sites as well, which increases the cost and the risk of development. Also, there's an import of about 65,000 cubic yards of dirt that need to be hauled onto the site to make the site developable as well. From a TIF cost benefit analysis, this is all in the application as well, but of course there's no shift in taxes from the existing taxing authorities. In this particular case, it's exempt anyway, so there are no taxes being generated by this particular property. So there are no shift in taxes. Part of the TIF will be used to improve the public infrastructure. Of course, there's new employment opportunities, and of course, it's always good to provide for the goods and services to the citizens of Bellevue with commercial development such as this. And then, of course, we remove the blight and substandard conditions that have been there for a long, long time with respect to the Wilson concrete plant. Not that it wasn't a good business in the day, it just things have changed now in Fort Crook, obviously. This comes to you with a favorable recommendation from the Planning Department as well as the Planning Commission. And with that, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have regarding the development.
Councilman Blood?
More of a statement. First of all, I want to say thank you. I heard the risk multiple times. Thank you for taking a risk on Bellevue. The previous council has been working on this since 2008. We were thrilled a year ago when you came into the picture and that you stuck it out for over a year. This is an important economic engine for the Fort Crook corridor, something that Bellevue desperately needs. I know there's concerns about TIF amongst some people, but when you look at the benefits and what amenities we have to offer you, our amenities are low. We don't have a lot of things to choose from because Bellevue unfortunately never started an economic development fund. And so really the only thing, as you know, we have to offer you is TIF. And so we have to balance out, since we're only allowed so much TIF money, as all communities in Nebraska, how much we can divvy. But when you look at the magnitude of impact this is going to have, I don't understand why there'd be any question amongst some of us. I personally say welcome, thank God. You're gonna make a huge difference on Fort Crook. I'm so excited, as I know most Bellevue citizens are. The one thing I'm gonna ask you is the same thing I ask all developers. You talked about encroachment, and it sounds like you came up with a great solution. We always ask that our developers make sure that they're being good neighbors, although I know that they're not necessarily on their own property, that they did encroach into your property. Some of them, not all of them, did it unknowingly, and this is their home, and they're just working class, middle income stiffs like me. And some of them put substantial money into their yards. So I appreciate the fact that you've already got a plan in place, and I ask that you do, if you can, work with them and make it as easy on them as possible, because they didn't purposely, in most cases, do it. And it's just a lot nicer when we don't have controversy. When we have new development come in, it just makes for a nicer time for you to come in without having people complain and gossip and create havoc. So we're thrilled to have you. And although we're not voting specifically on this right now, I say, give them the TIF money, gosh darn it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Obviously, Nebraska lacks in certain economic incentives, and TIFs is about the only one that we do have, and it has been successfully used, and when it's implemented correctly, as we believe in this particular case, you end up with a substantial asset to the city of Bellevue and the various taxing authorities, because currently it's exempt. There'll be a fair market value. So day one, the taxing authorities will actually start getting some tax value based upon the value that's established by the assessor on the undeveloped ground. And then, of course, as you start to get more and more development, and the way we've structured this, or when you see the redevelopment agreement come through, the TIF will have multiple division dates and multiple different notes, so there'll be different clocks starting at different times. But the idea, obviously, from the developer's perspective, is try to develop this as quickly as they can to try to recoup their costs and make a return on this particular asset. So I think this is a case where TIF can be successfully used, and I think it's a good one. As far as the neighbors during the planning commission meeting, I think the neighbors were appreciative of us working with them on the outlots and making sure that we don't disturb them and their buildings, and we're completely okay with that. And I think it is a great solution. That way you don't have a bunch of lawsuits trying to establish adverse possession and that kind of thing. So with that, no, I appreciate your comments.
Mr. Cook.
I'd like to thank you also. I think it's a very challenging property to try to develop. This is the first time I've ever gone through the TIF, and so the numbers are a little scary to me, to be honest. You mentioned something about still working with the Sarpy County on the value of the land. If I'm reading this right, the resolution is voting on the TIF part. I mean, are you in agreement with that? Or?
No, this is the redevelopment plan. I mean, if you were starting this process from the beginning, you would first have the blight and substandard designation. In this particular case, this property has already been designated blight and substandard to allow for the use of tax increment financing. So the next step in the process is where we are today, which is the redevelopment plan, and that's just how it's going to be implemented generally. What it is the developer is proposing. In this particular case, as in all redevelopment plans, you typically say what the parameters are of the TIF because you want to run an analysis, and of course we want to have the planning commission apprised of what we're doing, as well as the city council as well, because remember the redevelopment agreement itself doesn't go back to planning commission, only the city council. So the next document that you see will actually be the negotiated terms of the tax increment financing and the amount and how it's to be structured, by the agreement, both in how we're going to allocate TIF eligible expenses, how we're going to allocate, future build out, and then allowing the developer to really request the notice to divide based upon a lot or group of lots as we go forward. So I mean, I've done a lot of TIF deals. I'm happy to explain as much as you want, and we can do it here, or we can do it offline too.
Just real quick, you said it was eligible for $6.5 million, and you're saying the TIF.
No, TIF eligible expenses are $6.5 million. The project will only support $4.2 million based upon $26 million value less whatever the base year valuation is, as determined by the county assessor's office. So there's actually a spreadsheet that's attached to the packet, if you can see that, and so what that does is it shows you that that this project, given about 2.5 years to actually be built out, but in this particular case, we're going to structure it a little differently, that it will allow for multiple division dates and multiple promissory notes. So it actually gives the developer the opportunity to recover the full amount of the TIF request. And the law changed a couple years ago. It used to be where the division date was established the minute the city council approved the redevelopment plan. That's now changed. A couple years ago, the law was changed to say that the division date could be established by agreement. And so in this particular case, we're going to have an agreement that establishes multiple division dates from time to time as requested by the developer. And so it's actually a really good change in the law, because there are other developments I've done where that division date started day one. Well, of course, it takes 8 to 10, 12 years maybe to build out a shopping center like this. Well, the shopping centers that I did in the past, where you had the division date established at the time the redevelopment plan was approved, the clock starts running, and of course then the developer doesn't recoup what he anticipated because you don't have the build out in a timely fashion. Now, and yet everyone wants that, and that's what they strive for, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So when you look at the way this pro forma was done, and you look at the build out occurring over an 8 to 12 year period of time, without the use of TIF, the return is zero without the use of TIF. With the use of TIF, then it gets to a more reasonable range. I believe it's like 10% or 10 to 12% return on the investment, which no developer would accept anything really less than that, given the risks associated with this kind of a development. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Buckley.
And as a point of procedure, you have in the packet a resolution. The resolution is to approve the redevelopment plan that Mr. Jobin has presented. Also in your packet, you have an amended resolution. And that is because the original resolution, the language provides for just one division date and one 15-year clock on the project. And as Mr. Jobin explained, the law changed. This is a plan that contemplates multiple division dates. And the amended resolution is the one with the assistance of Mr. Jobin we recrafted and put in the packet, which better reflects the plan as far as the changes were made to this resolution regarding the division dates and the TIF financing. So if you want to approve the plan as he's outlined, you'd want to make a motion to approve the amended resolution.
Yes, thank you.
Any questions from the council? I'll go ahead and open for public hearing on this at this time. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time.
I'm up here to speak from a position of ignorance on tax increment financing. I did my best to read through the packet, but I failed to understand it. And so I have some questions, and I'm hoping that either the finance director or someone on the council would be able to explain to the public a little bit more about tax increment financing. At least my understanding is that we're either loaning them some money or giving them some money in expectation for a return later. I'm not sure exactly what's happening here and where the money's coming from and who's paying it. It would help to explain to the public about this issue, please.
Yes, Mr. Buckley.
TIF is legislation that allows a municipality to set off the taxes on a piece of property for development, hold those funds so that the investors can recoup the money they put into the project. And this is a way for development in such areas like this that are considered blighted and substandard, so that development can be done, investors come in, they are taking some risk, and they are getting assistance through the law that allows them to recoup their funds when the project is built. That increases the value of the property. Increase in value of the property therefore means more taxes are paid on the property. And if Mr. Jobin wants to step in too, feel free.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Yeah, I mean, what he says is correct. Actually, it's we refer to these kind of as reverse TIFs. Actually, the developer loans money to the city to put in those improvements that are deemed TIF eligible or tax increment financing eligible expenses. So it's actually a loan from the developer to the city, and there's really no money that changes hand. It's by offset. And so it's really the city agreeing to repay the developer for those expenses that are deemed TIF eligible under the community development law. So the loan actually is to the city, with the city agreeing to repay at some interest rate based upon the increment that we anticipate is going to be created. But it's on a non-recourse basis, meaning the city is not out any money, and the city does not have to pay the developer back for any of the TIF eligible expenses unless the developer creates the increment. If the developer doesn't build this out like they anticipate, or the value comes in at substantially less and the 15-year clock runs out, the developer is out. If the valuations come in at substantially higher, the city pays it off more quickly, the TIF, and then the taxing authorities get their money much quicker. So this is all sort of based upon pro formas and kind of anticipation of what the projected build-out's going to be, but the city's not out a dime. And what it allows really is the risk to be shifted to the developer, because then the developer's responsible for putting in all of the infrastructure costs and all the costs necessary to make this property developable. And with respect to those TIF eligible expenses that are deemed public in nature because you're eliminating a blight and substandard designation, they're allowing the city to pay that developer back for advancing those monies to the city by offset. So hopefully that helps explain.
What is your estimate as far as how long, year-wise, you think you can get this developed?
I think the pro forma we used was about 12 years, I believe, was the full build-out. Now, we hope it's much quicker than that. And again, when we talk about full 12 years, we're talking about Upper and Lower Wilson. We think that the Upper Wilson is probably a much more valuable property to develop. It's just has better visibility. It's just better access. The Cornhusker is really the kind of the main access road, if you will. Fort Crook, the lower Wilson, obviously that we think that will probably take more time to develop. And so because of that, you've got all these costs, acquisition costs and development costs that are continuing to accrue interest and carrying costs by the developer, yet you're not having any real valuation coming online. So that's...
But when you talk about the staggering, when the clock starts, when the clock starts, you have 15 years.
The clock, when the clock starts on that particular lot or group of lots, when they're developed, yes, it's 15 years from that date. That starts the clock. If the developer doesn't get the full amount of the TIF that they anticipate from that lot or group of lots, they're out. If they get it more quickly, because the values online are higher than anticipated, or the tax levy goes up from what's originally called for in the pro forma, then the redevelopment note on that particular lot or group of lots will be paid back more quickly, which is a good thing, because then all the taxes, 100% of them on the land and improvements, regardless of base year or the increment key number, goes 100% to the various taxing authorities.
But if, let's say 5 acres doesn't develop and it's 20 years later, if it gets developed on year 21, that's when the 15-year clock starts for that development.
We don't have currently any outer date set, for development. Right now, we say that the 15 years will start to run when the developer notifies the city to file the division date, request for the division date with the county assessor's office, and then that sets the clock. So currently, I suppose that's right. I mean, we didn't set any outer limit as far as the time for when that would occur. But again, the idea is, remember, this is an economic incentive. So cities should want to use economic incentives the best way they can to help developers. You want developers to make money and come back and do other deals in the city of Bellevue. So it's not a bad thing because it's an economic incentive. So,
well, I was more looking at previous, or in the future councils, if that this could really hang on for 20, 30 years. Realistically, if 5 acres is not developed, or it doesn't have to be 5 acres, and tomorrow you put in this request to build a building, that's when your clock starts typing, or clicking, ticking for the next 15 years. I just didn't know if the developer would be, just to try to narrow that down to say, okay, 15 years plus 15, in other words, if something would start at year 13, 14, up to 15, then the clock would start another 15 years. But how long do we drag it out?
And we haven't really discussed that. I guess the idea is, and the good news about this whole thing is at least with respect to the land value, there's a base year that will be established right away. So the taxing authorities will get day one the value on the underlying ground multiplied by the various levies of the taxing authorities. So there is an advantage with respect to that. You don't have necessarily the full build-out valuation right away, but you've got a mechanism in place and an agreement in place that will call for that down the road.
No,
I'm glad
you guys are here.
The developer, the last thing they want to be doing is sitting here in year 21 with the 5 acres undeveloped.
Believe me, I understand. One thing I just want to make a comment. From my understanding, maybe you can help me. All the taxing agencies on the property tax, so like the school system, and all those are notified that this is being considered. So, it's not a surprise. Oh, Chris, I'm sorry.
In the planning part
Planning?
We notify the county, the NRD, ESU number 3, the school district, and MUD. I think there's 5 of them.
Okay.
So that are taxing authorities that we notify. And
is that all of them, or is that just?
Those are the ones that are required by state statute that we know. I think there are probably some other, there are other smaller entities that tax.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't I wanted everybody to understand that it's not a surprise that there is a mechanism in place to notify these people that we're considering this, and that if they would want to be here today and talk, they would have an opportunity.
And actually, we notify them twice, once before the Planning Commission meeting and once before this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Blood.
I just want to point out, and we talked about this a little bit, I think, before the council meeting, You know, if you research this development company, they're not known for holding on to something for 21 years and not developing it. I mean, these guys, I'm trying to think of a phrase that's dramatic. I want to say kick butt, and that's probably not the right word. They're assertive and aggressive when it comes to development, and they pick projects that they know are going to work. And so, you know, when we look at things like that, and I have those fears too when we bring in new development. Is it going to work? What's going to happen to us if it doesn't work? But the first thing I always do is I look at track record, and they have an exceptional track record.
Mr. Buckley?
Yeah, and just to clarify, Mr. Cook, the vote on the resolution tonight is basically just to approve the plan. It's basically you're just approving this conceptually. You're not actually voting or approving any TIF agreement.
That's what we were talking about, because I needed clarification, so thank you.
Are there others that would like to speak on this item? Please do so.
Chuck Frederick, 1511 Madison Street. Only thing I'm not really clear on is when does the city start receiving some income or money from this? Is it as soon as the first development is in there, or is it how long does it take before the city starts receiving something?
Mr. Buckley?
And Mr. Jobin can correct me if I'm wrong, but we get the base value, the base on the first value, first valuation, and then over the 15-year period or however long it takes, the assessor withholds, and I'm not sure the amount, but that's in the plan, is for each of the authorities, a certain amount is held, and then when it's completed, then the full amount of the tax with the increment improved value is then returned to the taxing authorities, and Mr. Jobin may be able to clarify that better.
Sure.
You can come back,
Okay.
But I'll answer your question real quick. What happens actually is that there's two key numbers that are created by the assessor's office. So the first key number, you know, when you pay taxes, it's based upon key number. So each lot within the development will end up with two key numbers eventually, but the first key number is the base year valuation. And so that sets the base, and all the various taxing authorities, when I said there was no shift in taxes, meaning that when the taxes are paid to the county treasurer based upon the value that was established by the assessor's office, the taxes will come in, of course, your first half April 1st, second half August 1st of every year, right? And so based upon this, the notice to divide, and based upon this redevelopment agreement being in place, the county treasurer will pay the city finance department on the other key number, which is the increment above the base. And so it'll actually come in at two different times, and typically it comes into the city maybe a month delay by the time they process the various TIF payments as they come in. So then the base year multiplied by the levy goes to the various taxing authorities based upon what the assessor is going to value the land at. The increment key number then, when it gets paid into the treasurer's office, the treasurer will pay that money to the city finance department, and the city finance department then, of course, will pay that to the developer as part of the promissory note or the TIF note that the developer's holding. So that's how it's repaid, and it's repaid over 15 years or shorter if it's or not paid at all if there's not sufficient increment to amortize the note over the 15-year period. So hopefully that helps. But usually I draw out this big schematic to help explain it, but and I'd be happy to do that in private to the extent you had further questions. But it's a good process, and it works well. Again, I've done quite a few of these, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jobin.
I just got one other question too. Other TIFs in the past, when there's been like one company, I think there's been some restrictions, some things that said that you have to hire so many people in X number of time in order to receive that TIF. I don't know if there's any type of situation for employment for this development, or is that something just taken away because of the new developments they have in the TIF?
Those have been on the CDBG reuse funds, and money that came from Nebraska Department of Economic Development. They were not TIF funds.
Thank you, Chris. Are there others that would like to speak on this item? See none, I'll close the public hearing. What are the wishes of the council? Ms. Sanyuk.
Motion to approve the redevelopment plan for lots 1 through 12 and outlots A through G, Cornhusker Point, Course Lab property.
Second.
That's,
The
actually, we're going actually to 10A1.
Oh, okay, all right.
Resolution. The
Mo-
plan was just a
Okay,
hearing.
motion to approve the amended resolution number 2014-01, Cornhusker Point redevelopment plan approval.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Ms. Sanyuk.
Motion to approve the preliminary plat for lots 1 through 12 and outlets A through G, Cornhusker Point.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 11, resolutions, none. Item 12, current business, 12A, B, C, D. We removed B. We removed B. So A, C, D, E, F, G, H is under consent. G is under consent. H, approve a low bid from Security Equipment, Inc. in the amount of $67,140. I'm sorry?
Yeah, we have to address.
12B needs to be addressed. Councilwoman Sanyuk.
There were some questions apparently on appointing a citizen to this committee, so I'm going to move that we delay this till the next council meeting on January 27th.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. 12 through G under consent. That takes us to item H, approval of low bid from Security Equipment, Inc. in the amount of $67,140 for the access control system at 1510 Wall Street. Councilwoman Blood.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve this low bid from Security Equipment in the amount of $67,140 for the access control system desperately needed for 1510 Wall Street.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carmichael. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Did Steve didn't get to speak.
No, you're doing good.
Thank you for standing up there.
He's ready to go.
He's ready to just get.
You got one more to go.
I approve of low bid from Prime Communications in the amount of $32,398.95 for 2 security camera systems for 1510 Wall Street. Councilwoman Blood.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the lowest bid from Prime Communication in the amount of $32,398.95 for 2 security camera systems for 1510 Wall Street property.
And second.
Second by Mr. Carmichael. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. J, approval of contract for a technology platform used in cyber crimes investigation at the cost of $220 per month. Mr. Cook.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract for a technology platform used in cybercrimes investigations at a cost of $220 per month.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. K, approval to ratify a change in lease proposal to the Veterans Administration for the 1500 Wall Street building by increasing the tenant improvements by $100,000 for a total of $1,819,930 and eliminating the $1,500 per day penalty. Ms. Sanyuk.
Motion to approve to ratify a change in the lease proposal to the Veterans Administration for the 1500 Wall Street building by increasing the tenant improvements by $100,000 for a total of $1,819,930 and eliminating the $1,500 per day penalty.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Blood. Any discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Takes us to item 13, public requests to be heard. Any member of the public addressing the council shall abide by council policy resolution 35 regarding the principles of conduct and decorum, which states any statement made during city council meetings by the mayor, members of the city council, city officials, and employees, or members of the general public shall not involve personal, impertinent, or slanderous attacks on individuals, regardless of whether the individual so attacked is an elected official, a city official, or employee, or a member of the general public. And City Code 2-68, regarding the manners of addressing the council. Copies of the aforementioned rules are posted outside the council chambers. Speakers shall limit their presentations to 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name's Elaine Banky. And I wanted to thank, on the behalf of our cat-loving community, this council for passing an ordinance that will give us an opportunity to show you what a benefit we can be to the city of Bellevue. We've already been asked by other cities members to come and help them get ordinances to take care of the feral cats in their communities as well. So I thank you for being the pioneers in Sarpy County.
Thank you, Ms. Banky. Are there others that would like to speak this evening?
Yeah, Jim Modry, 1207 Rebecca Court again. Couple things. First, it's a normal propensity of government at all levels, and local government is not immune to it either, of continuing to increase the number of ordinances, codes, regulations, inspections, licensing requirements, and so forth. So I would just urge, as we start this new year, for the council to take a look at what we have on the books now, and look at what the heck is stupid and doesn't make sense anymore, and try to reduce some of the burden that really discourages economic development in many cases. One item, as I was looking through the code, that probably very few citizens are aware of is requirement for registering bicycles and going through an inspection and paying 50 cents, not a large amount, but having those bicycles licensed and a plate on the rear of the bicycle. And I don't know if many 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids out there who have that on their bicycles as they're riding around neighborhoods. So an example. Another item, and I've spoken on Green Bellevue before a couple times, but they have put out a document, Get Up to Speed on Climate Change. And so I looked through that. It doesn't get me up to speed on climate change at all. It gives me one viewpoint propagated by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and does not reference every reference in here is to that side of the argument. There are many other reputable organizations who have countering viewpoints and have actually debunked many of the points that the United Nations puts out as their position. One of those is the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change, an IPCC. Doesn't have any attachment or sponsorship from any governmental groups or agencies. So it's independent of political pressures and influences and not predisposed to produce politically motivated conclusions or policy recommendations. It doesn't conform to any specific agenda like the United Nations does, which is the United Nations agency is government-sponsored, politically motivated, predisposed to believing that climate change is a problem in need of a UN resolution. We need to take a balanced approach to this. And I bring it up because tomorrow you all have a strategic planning session at the Fire Training Center. One of the items in the strategic plan has to do with environmental initiatives. One of the points in your strategic plan is that you support all initiatives of Green Bellevue. Take a critical look at that. I've spoken previously about some of the organizations at Green Bellevue. Pushes 350.org, some of the people that are involved with that organization and so forth. I'll be there tomorrow. I know this is getting out too late to the residents of Bellevue for them to know about it, but people here in the room at least are aware now. Thank you.
Councilman Blood.
Mayor, I know I can't respond directly to Mr. Modry, but can we have somebody on staff give Mr. Modry a copy of what was presented this afternoon, the Green Bellevue initiative that is saving us thousands of dollars by going green in the library? And from OPPD. And also, I know that Kay sends out public notice for strategic planning, just like she does for our council meetings. But I would not want the public hearing this on TV tonight thinking that there was not a public notice. Kay, don't you send out a public notice for strategic planning? Because it's a public meeting?
Public meeting.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, so there wasn't misinformation out there.
Steve Draper, 9807 South 24th Street. I'm just going to kind of piggyback on a couple things that Jim Modry talked about on the bicycle license thing. I don't think it's a big deal whether we have an ordinance for that or not, but I will speak for the reason to keep it on the books. It's no big deal if you don't keep it on the books, but the 50 cents, that just pays for the cost of the little sticker that you put on the bicycle. That doesn't get any revenue for the city. And the reason for that is not for you and I as adults who ride bicycles. It's for the kids. When they have, because kids, they steal each other's bicycles and they just ride it, they drive it 3 blocks and they leave it in somebody's yard. And then the police department has a big stock of bicycles that they don't know who they belong to. And the purpose of that is it saves the city some time and money, because the ones that do happen to have that little license on there, they can go look in the records and say, okay, this is the person that registered to. They can call that person, they get the bicycle back to them, rather than the police having to spend time, tracking this stuff down. So I think probably in the long run, it's better just leave it on the books. But I would, it's not a mandatory thing. I mean, there's no penalty if somebody doesn't put one on their bicycle. There is no penalty in the books, so it's no big deal leaving it on there. I think there's probably still some benefit to doing that. On the greenhouse emissions things, I want to echo what Jim Modry said, and that is, there's a lot of hype out there, and just today I read a study that was done. This was a practical study. It was a group, they took 2 cars, well, they took the same car. It was a flex fuel vehicle. They drove it from, I think it was San Diego to Las Vegas and back, round trip. It was 667 miles round trip, so they could compare performance. And the first time they filled it up with regular gasoline, drove round trip, and then they emptied the tank completely and then filled it with E85, which is 85% ethanol, to see how it compared and drove round trip. Okay, well, the ethanol, the 85% ethanol got 25% poorer gas mileage, but they looked at the cost, the total cost for the round trip. It was still ended up costing 25% more. The dollar cost was for the round trip in the E85 ethanol, filling up the gas tank. And their conclusion was, and then they said, well, how about emissions? They compared emissions. There was only 5% lower emissions on that E85. So the conclusion was, the only people who are going to do this are just passionate about saving 5% on emissions on our economy and are willing to spend that extra money to do so. So, I know that OPPD is, not OP, it's MUD is pushing the natural gas vehicles. I don't know if this, they claim that costs less money. I just say, as a city, let's not jump on this bandwagon of greenhouse emissions, because it's not settled fact as that community would claim that it is. So that's an area where I say let's just stay out of regulating or get involved in that and let the people do what they want to do. They got some free agency there, you know. They got, people are smart, they're intelligent, they'll make their own decisions based on what they personally want to do.
Councilman Blood.
Yes, Mr. Berlowitz, I would encourage, when Councilman Preister comes back, that he sit down and discuss the green initiative, because I think some of what I'm hearing is really about miscommunication. As those of us on the council know, the vast majority of things that have been pushed forward that pertain to Green Bellevue are things that have ended up saving the city substantial amounts of money and have brought us certification as being Tree City USAs, and brought new trees to the floodplain where the trees were wiped out. Trees that we learn in grade school science do what? Right? So that has nothing to do with being green, that has to do with providing oxygen and being able to breathe. But I ask that that we arrange a meeting with Mr. Draper, who's always so kind to talk with people when we give him that opportunity, and Councilman Preister, because I think that there's been some confusion. It's more about saving taxpayer dollars than forcing people to drive special cars or buy certain kinds of gas. It's about finding ways to go green and save money for the city of Bellevue, and we've done it very effectively.
Good evening. First thing, a happy new year to everybody. Last year, when you balanced the budget, you had to raise the taxes for this year, and also you're going to raise them again for next year. But also you had to cut some services. You said the library isn't open on Sunday, and I think you said you were going to close one swimming pool. Now, after that time, you now have leased the cell phone towers for 40 years, and you're going to receive, maybe you have already received the $2.65 million. And as you know, I oppose this leasing. I thought that was not the right thing to do, but if it's done now, it's done. But I'd like to have certainly a full accountability of where that $2.6 million goes. I have some resolutions that for the new year for the city council, and just go through them quickly. One is to hire a full-time city attorney. I've talked about that many times. Two, get going on the second library. Rather than just talk about it, let's do something. Number three, insist that the financial director does a monthly balance sheet, do payroll in-house, take the rescue squad building away from the fire department, and as one councilperson said, let's get rid of the at-large position as quickly as possible. And rather than just talk about it, let's do some of those things. One thing that when Mayor Sanders reads the rules, I think I follow those rules pretty closely, but last meeting, there are people here who didn't follow the rules. According to what I understand is that when I talk, nobody's supposed to either make a comment to anybody in the council or otherwise make a comment about me. And that happened last year, and last meeting of the last year, when Mr. Severson basically called me a liar. He said the figures I had for the rescuing the rescue squad wasn't the amount I said. And he said I have to prove it. Well, number one, I don't get paid for any of this. And one councilperson said that, I should be doing all this, and I said, I'm saying to this right now to begin with is, number one, it should be up to you people to verify, to make sure those numbers are right. And when I see these numbers, I never see any signatures on the bottom of these numbers, like somebody's really verifying them and is willing to back them up. So that's one thing right there. And so what's going to happen now is that I guess I have to try to prove it. But how I'm going to prove it is going to be at my time, because I have other things I do too. But what I am going to go to do is I'm going to talk to city administrator, the mayor, make appointments, the finance director, the fire chief, the person who does the billing for the fire chief. I'm going to make appointments, and I'm going to sit down. I'll give them something that I want to, the question that I want to ask, what I want results of, and I'm going to then go and have a appointment with these people. And at that time, I invite the Bellevue Leader reporter and the World Herald reporter to come with me so they can hear what everybody says. You know, I shouldn't have to do this, but I don't think those figures are right. I think I'm right. If you recall, when I questioned the cash flow billing for the amount they were collecting, when I said 97%, I was almost kind of made fun of by the Bellevue Leader because I didn't say 99%. They were collecting that much of the money that was owed them, owed the city. You know, it's time that we take some responsibility and look at this, and look at the numbers, and that's what I'm going to have to do. But I don't like to do it that way. But that's what I will do. And again, it'll be at my timing, because I don't have time to be doing this all the time. If all this was done, like I talked about, you wouldn't even see me anymore. I think the city would be run a lot better. The other thing that Mr. Mudry talked about last year at the last meeting was the $550,000 that the fire chief gave you guys to collect. I haven't heard a word about that, and he talked about it last time too. So these are some of the things that are going to be coming up this year, and like I say, I'll have to do this, but I'm reluctant, but I will. When I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the way that somebody's not going to say I'm a liar, because they said that one time before and I was proven right, and I think I'll be proven right again. Thank you.
Councilwoman Blood.
Yes, Mayor, again, I'm just worried about misinformation getting out. Mr. Buckley, who's responsible for the city attorney? Is it the council, as was just said, or is it our mayor?
I'm not sure I understand
Who
your
appoints?
question.
The
mayor
right,
appoints the city attorney.
We don't select the city attorney. That's one of the few privileges that the mayor has in a weak mayor system.
The appointment it must be confirmed by the
Right.
council.
But it's not our choice who is our legal representative.
Dottie Draper, I live at 9807 South 24th Street here in Bellevue. And I just wanted to say I was grateful and impressed with the background checking y'all did, especially Councilman Blood, as you spoke about the developer. I'm not real educated in business. I'm a nurse, but I don't know all that much about business. And so I was pretty nervous when he got up and started talking, and it took him quite a while to get into saying that he was going to have retail businesses in there and stuff. And so then I was like, well, I wrote a little note on my paperwork saying, I wonder how long he's been in business and what kind of companies he's done, you know, and it was a great relief to know that you had checked them out thoroughly. And I really appreciated that. And I also appreciate when you guys stop and give us some additional information, because you guys, you find out all this stuff and you know what's going on between you. And when we ask a question, it's just nice that you give us that extra input. Because a lot of times I have questions, but I don't know how to voice them in a way that sounds like I know what I'm talking about. And so when you guys give us that input, it really is very, very helpful. So I just wanted to thank you for that. I'm grateful for the service you give us. I'm done.
Are there others that would like to speak at this time? Please do so. Seeing none, I'll close the public request to be heard. Ms. Sanyuk.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Cook. Please vote.